The warm summer night wrapped around the secluded cabin like a blanket, stars twinkling overhead as if they were in on a secret about to unfold. The weekend getaway had been Jake's idea. It always was. Jake had this way of making spontaneous decisions that somehow turned into the best memories. He was the kind of person who lived in Technicolor while everyone else seemed to exist in black and white. His laugh was infectious, his smile disarming, and his ability to convince you to do things you'd never normally do was both terrifying and exhilarating. That's how Liam found himself agreeing to this trip in the first place, despite the mountain of work waiting for him back home. Liam had always been the more reserved of the two, the planner, the one who thought things through. Where Jake jumped, Liam calculated. Where Jake spoke freely, Liam chose his words carefully. They were opposites in many ways, yet their friendship had endured for over a decade. They'd met in college, randomly assigned as roommates, and what could have been a disaster turned into the most significant relationship of both their lives. Through graduations, job changes, failed relationships with others, they remained constants for each other. But lately, something had been shifting between them, an undercurrent of tension that neither had acknowledged. The cabin Jake had rented was rustic but comfortable, with large windows overlooking a lake and a deck that featured the crown jewel, a hot tub big enough for 6, but perfect for 2. The first day had been filled with hiking and exploring, conversations flowing easily as they always did. But as night fell and the temperature dropped, Jake suggested they try out the hot tub. "Come on," he'd said, already changing into his swim shorts. "It'll be the perfect end to the day." And Liam, as always, found himself unable to say no. The hot tub sat on the corner of the deck, partially sheltered by an overhang, but open to the night sky. Steam rose from the surface of the water, disappearing into the cool night air. The underwater lights cast a blue glow that made everything feel slightly dreamlike. Jake had already settled in, his arms stretched out along the edge, head tilted back as he looked up at the stars. Liam paused for a moment, taking in the sight of his friend, allowing himself to acknowledge the flutter in his stomach that had become increasingly common lately. "Are you just going to stand there all night?" Jake called out, not bothering to look over. "The water's perfect." Liam rolled his eyes but couldn't help smiling as he stepped into the hot tub. The warmth enveloped him immediately, a pleasant contrast to the cool night air. He settled on the opposite side from Jake, letting the jets massage his back. The sound of the bubbling water filled the silence between them, comfortable at first, but gradually taking on a weight of its own. "This was a good idea," Liam finally said, breaking the silence. "I didn't realize how much I needed to get away." Jake looked over at him, his expression softening. "You work too hard. Always have. Someone has to remind you to live a little. And I suppose that someone is you?" Liam asked, raising an eyebrow. "Who else would put up with your stubborn ass?" Jake laughed, splashing water in Liam's direction. This was their dynamic, the teasing, the banter, the way they could read each other so easily. But tonight, there was something else beneath the familiar patterns, something electric and uncertain. They fell into conversation about nothing and everything. Work stories, memories from college, plans for the future. Jake talked about his latest photography project, his eyes lighting up as he described the abandoned buildings he'd been capturing. Liam shared his frustrations with his new boss, feeling the tension leave his body as Jake listened attentively, offering both sympathy and practical advice. "Remember that time in senior year when we stayed up all night working on your thesis?" Jake asked, shifting slightly closer in the water. "You were so stressed you actually cried over a misplaced comma." Liam groaned at the memory. "It wasn't just a comma. It was the principle of the thing. And you weren't exactly helpful, falling asleep on my notes." "I was moral support," Jake protested, his laugh echoing across the lake. "Besides, you got an A, so clearly my presence was beneficial." As they reminisced, Liam became increasingly aware of how their lives had intertwined over the years. They'd seen each other through breakups and job losses, celebrations and disappointments. Jake had been there when Liam's father passed away, showing up at his door with no words, just open arms and unwavering presence. Liam had talked Jake through his crisis of confidence when his first gallery showing hadn't gone as planned. They knew each other's secrets, fears, dreams, everything except perhaps the most important thing of all. The night deepened around them, the moon rising higher in the sky, casting silver light across the water of the lake. They'd been in the hot tub for over an hour, their skin pruning, but neither made a move to leave. The conversation had drifted into comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts yet acutely aware of the other's presence. It was in this moment that Jake reached over to the control panel and, without warning, shut off the jets. The sudden silence was deafening, the only sound now the gentle lapping of water against the sides of the tub and their own breathing. Liam looked up, confused by the change, to find Jake's eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart skip. "What are you doing?" Liam asked, his voice coming out softer than he intended. Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved through the water, closing the distance between them until he was right next to Liam. The hot tub suddenly felt much smaller, the air between them charged with possibility. Jake's hand found Liam's arm underwater, fingers wrapping gently around his wrist, and pulled him in closer. "Something I should have done a long time ago," Jake finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. They were face to face now, close enough that Liam could see droplets of water clinging to Jake's eyelashes, could feel the warmth of his breath. Time seemed to suspend itself, stretching out this moment of anticipation, of standing on the edge of something that could change everything. Liam's heart pounded in his chest, so loud he was certain Jake must hear it. This was the moment he had both longed for and feared, the acknowledgement of what had been building between them for years. The possibility of more was terrifying not because he didn't want it, but because he wanted it too much. What if it didn't work? What if they lost everything they already had? "I'm scared," Liam admitted, the words escaping before he could stop them. Jake's expression softened, understanding immediately what Liam meant. His hand moved from Liam's wrist to his face, cupping his cheek with a gentleness that made Liam's breath catch. "I know," Jake said. "Me too. But I'm more scared of never knowing what this could be." The honesty in Jake's voice broke something open in Liam's chest. Here was Jake, confident, fearless Jake, admitting his own vulnerability. It was this admission more than anything that gave Liam the courage to lean in, closing the final distance between them. Their lips met softly at first, a question being asked and answered in the same moment. The kiss deepened as Jake's hand moved to the back of Liam's neck, pulling him closer still. The world narrowed to just this. The warmth of the water around them, the coolness of the night air on their wet shoulders, and the heat of their bodies pressed together. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Liam found himself smiling uncontrollably. Jake's eyes were wide with wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that," Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. Liam laughed softly. "Probably about as long as I've wanted you to." They stayed like that, foreheads touching, sharing the same space, the same air. The significance of what had just happened settled around them. Not just a kiss, but a door opening to something new, something they'd both been circling for years. "So what happens now?" Liam asked, always the one to think ahead, to worry about consequences. Jake smiled, his fingers tracing patterns on Liam's shoulder. "Now we figure it out together. Day by day. No pressure, no rush. Just us seeing where this goes. What if it changes everything?" Liam couldn't help asking, voicing his deepest fear. "It will," Jake said simply. "But maybe that's not a bad thing. Some things need to change to become what they're meant to be." They talked for hours after that, the water cooling around them, neither caring enough to get out. They talked about when they'd first realized their feelings had shifted from friendship to something more. For Jake, it had been 3 years ago, when Liam had stayed by his side through a brutal bout of flu, reading to him when he was too dizzy to look at screens, making sure he stayed hydrated. For Liam, it had been gradual, no single moment, but a slow awakening to the fact that what he felt for Jake was unlike anything he'd felt for anyone else. They talked about their fears, of ruining their friendship, of what others might think, of the challenges that would come with shifting the nature of their relationship. But with each concern voiced and addressed, the path forward became clearer. What they had was too important not to explore fully, too precious to deny out of fear. As the night deepened toward morning, they finally left the hot tub, their skin wrinkled and their hearts full. Inside the cabin, they fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, neither willing to be separated even by the short distance between their bedrooms. They slept deeply, peacefully, as if something that had been unsettled within them both had finally found its place. The morning brought sunshine streaming through the windows and a new sense of possibility. They moved around each other in the kitchen, making breakfast together as they had countless times before, but now with casual touches, shared smiles, and the freedom to express the affection they'd both been holding back. "I was thinking," Jake said as they sat on the deck with coffee, watching the mist rise off the lake. "We should come back here. Make it our place." Liam looked at him, at this person who had been his best friend for so long and was now becoming something even more important. "I'd like that," he said simply. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of discovery, learning the new language of their relationship while still speaking the familiar dialect of their friendship. They hiked and swam during the day, and at night they returned to the hot tub, now a place of significance for them both. On their last night, as they packed up the cabin and prepared to return to their regular lives, Liam found himself momentarily overwhelmed by uncertainty. "Do you think we can make this work in the real world?" he asked as they stood in the kitchen, the dishwasher humming in the background. Jake crossed the room to him, taking both his hands. "This is the real world, Liam. Us, here now. And yes, I think we can make it work anywhere because it's us. We've been making things work for 10 years already." And Liam, looking into Jake's eyes, found he believed him. What they had built over a decade of friendship was a foundation strong enough to support whatever came next. The hot tub moment hadn't created something new. It had simply revealed what had been there all along, waiting for them to be brave enough to acknowledge it. 6 months later, they returned to the cabin to celebrate their anniversary. The hot tub welcomed them back, and as they settled into the warm water under a sky full of stars, Jake reached for Liam's hand underwater. "Best decision I ever made," Jake said, "turning off those jets and pulling you in." Liam squeezed his hand, thinking of all that had unfolded since that night. The joy of waking up together, the challenges of merging their lives more completely, the surprised but supportive reactions of their friends, the deeper understanding they developed of each other. "Best decision we ever made," he corrected gently. And as they sat there, surrounded by the night and the memories they'd created, Liam understood that the most beautiful stories aren't always about dramatic beginnings, but about finding the courage to recognize when something ordinary has become extraordinary. Their story hadn't started in the hot tub. It had been writing itself for years in every conversation, every shared experience, every moment of being there for each other. The hot tub was simply the place where they'd finally turned the page to a new chapter, one they would continue writing together for years to come. What had once been unspoken now had a voice. What had once been hidden now lived in the light. And in that transformation, they had found something rare and precious. A love built on the bedrock of true friendship, a connection that honored their past while embracing their future. As Jake had said that first night, some things need to change to become what they're meant to be. And what they had become, together, was exactly what they were always meant to be. Total _char_count, 17,842.